Good morning and happy Friday, everyone. I'm Chris DiPentima, President and CEO of CBIA. Welcome to the 2022 Economic Summit and Outlook, hosted by CBIA and our good friends, the Metro Hartford Alliance, and made possible again this year through the generous support of our great member company, Webster Bank. We have a great lineup of speakers this morning, beginning with Governor Ned Lamont, who will be joining us in about 15 minutes to address several topics, including the latest on the coronavirus and his administration's priorities for this coming legislative session. And we want to hear from you this morning. If you have questions for the governor or any of our speakers, put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. McKinsey & Company's Ezra Greenberg follows the governor at 9:15 with his outlook for the state and national economies. There's certainly a lot of ground to cover there, and I'm looking forward to hearing his take on pending challenges and opportunities. We're also releasing our 2022 legislative policy priorities today, which were designed with input from many of you in our audience to address those challenges and opportunities that are specific to Connecticut. This is a critical legislative session. I cannot stress that enough. As we enter the third year of the pandemic, the policy choices made over the next few months will determine the strength and viability of our economic recovery, a recovery that has tremendous promise. Connecticut has navigated the past 2 years better than most. We're a leader in managing the public health crisis with one of the highest vaccination rates in the country. And the state's near-term fiscal health is also one of the country's strongest, with a projected $2.2 billion budget surplus this fiscal year, $1.9 billion the following year, and a reserve fund projected to exceed $5 billion by June 30th, a testament to the 2017 bipartisan budget reforms. Those reforms also helped improve Connecticut's rankings in national business climate polls in almost every category except the cost of doing business, an area directly influenced by the state's tax and labor policies. Federal pandemic relief dollars helped Connecticut navigate the past 2 years, and federal funds will continue to play a significant role, with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act expected to inject $5.4 billion into the state over the next 5 years. Let's be clear. Connecticut is awash in money. And first and foremost, we must maintain the fiscal discipline that put us in this position. We still face long-term fiscal challenges and cannot afford to return to the endless deficit and cycle tax hikes of the past decade. The state's current fiscal picture provides a platform to do much more than hold the line on taxes and pay down our long-term liabilities. This is the year to implement comprehensive tax relief for both individuals and businesses, capitalizing on the influx of new residents and companies to make Connecticut a true destination for individuals and businesses. It's also time that lawmakers did something about the constant torrent of workplace mandates that further drive up high costs of doing business, dumping administrative burdens on small employers, and reinforcing tired, old perceptions about the state's business climate being unfriendly. Taxes and labor mandates are the primary inhibitors to growing our great state. Connecticut lawmakers should be making it easier, not more difficult, to create jobs here and to attract and keep companies here. The pandemic exacerbated many of our structural issues that hobbled our recovery from the 2008 to 2010 recession. And we must address workforce challenges that have simmered for years because of sluggish population growth and now represent the greatest threat to our recovery. 80% of employers, 80%, told our annual business survey last year they struggle to find and retain employees. We need policies that not only provide the skill sets employers need, but make Connecticut competitive to encourage migration to grow our workforce pie. Connecticut employers also prioritize government spending reforms. And the administration's Creates report, which includes $600 to $900 million in annual savings, must be a feature of this session. Last year's legislative session, which saw the adoption of a number of CBIA's policy recommendations, did much to position Connecticut for a strong recovery. Our 2022 policy priorities represent the next step in that journey. Solutions-based recommendations designed to sustain and build on the momentum of the past year. Let's make sure we continue attracting residents and businesses to the state, leveraging the competitive advantages neighboring states are giving us through their adverse tax policies. And most importantly, let's continue working together to enhance the state's competitiveness, elevate small businesses, and fuel economic growth by nurturing businesses and the opportunities they create for our communities and for all residents. CBIA's Eric Getty will talk with a bipartisan group of state legislators later this morning about their priorities for the session and the next steps for maximizing our strength to rebuild our economy more vibrant and robust than before. And our keynote speaker, General Dynamics Electric Boat President Kevin Graney, will be here at 11 a.m. to share how the company is using collaborative partnerships to meet its workforce needs and his outlook for the defense manufacturing sector. I cannot say enough about the support of John Ciulla and his Webster Bank team. Webster is a terrific corporate citizen and a champion of Connecticut, and we are grateful for the company's long-standing partnership with CBIA and for their continued generous support of this event. Joining us this morning is Webster Executive Vice President and Head of Commercial Banking, Chris Model. Chris, good morning. Why don't you give us an update on how the merger is going with Sterling?
Thank you, Chris, and it's a pleasure to be here. Also, I'd like to thank CBIA and the Metro Hartford Alliance for supporting this annual event and the Economic Summit. John Ciulla, unfortunately, could not be here, and he gives his regards to everyone. As far as with the merger and answering your question there, Chris, just quickly, we have 4,500 combined employees with the two banks, and we're excited to receive approval over the holiday week, and we're all ready to go. So we're hoping that the merger will actually take place on February 1st, and we'll start merging the two banks together. The combined bank will actually have $60 billion in assets, over $11 billion market cap, and the one that's really interesting to serve the Connecticut businesses is we'll have combined almost 100,000 small and medium-sized businesses throughout our footprint and into New York with the merger. We also, just quickly, we'll also have 200 branches on a combined basis, and the interesting one there is only 3 of the branches overlap. We'll have 11,000 business borrowers, and only less than 30 of those borrowers both borrow from Webster and Sterling today, so there's not a lot of overlap and very complementary acquisition and merger. So we're excited about this to occur on February 1st.
Chris, that's fantastic news about the merger, and congratulations. Why don't you tell us, what does that mean for the Connecticut economy and the shareholders?
No, that's a great question, and really I look at it, looking at our 4 stakeholders. And really when we look at our 4 stakeholders, obviously the customers, we really look that we can provide more treasury services, really expand our lending platform so that we can, more efficiently and effectively serve all the different segments within those that are coming to us for debt. And then lastly, hopefully we can actually take bigger holds on some of the larger middle market and corporate customers with a bigger balance sheet. If we go to our employees, this will really provide us an opportunity to invest with them, provide them a career path, and give them training and opportunity so they can remain at Webster longer term and not go to a larger company. For our shareholders, obviously, with the new investment in our products and services, we should attract and grow revenue. Secondly, we'll be able to scale some of the expenses. As we scale the expenses combined with the new revenue, it should actually produce more net income and increase our ROE to our shareholders. And lastly, maybe most importantly, is what will we do for the communities we serve? We actually have committed 20% more investment in all the communities that both banks serve today over the next 3 years on an annual average basis. So we're going to continue to invest, and it actually gives us a lot more opportunity to obviously invest in all stakeholders that we serve. And then also, just to share, upon the completion of the merger, the good news is we'll still be a Connecticut-based bank, and I'm excited about that. So now, I'm honored to introduce Governor Lamont, and it's interesting, we have 3,000 employees here at Webster Bank, and the challenge of managing the last 2 years through the pandemic has been very difficult. But obviously, I can't imagine what it was like for Governor Lamont for the last 2 years with 3.5 million residents of Connecticut. And I have to applaud him and his administration on taking swift action at the beginning of this pandemic. It helped protect a lot of Connecticut citizens, And I look forward to hearing from Governor Lamont on 2022 and beyond his plans for the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, and thanks to Webster Bank. You guys are amazing anchor tenants here in the state of Connecticut. And Chris and Eric and everybody at CBIA, it's great to be back. Let me just pick up where Chris left off. I'll say, broadly speaking, when I ran for governor, it seemed to me that it wasn't necessarily that there was a bad relationship between state government and business. In many cases, there was no relationship. And one of the first things I wanted to do was change that, knowing that Connecticut can't succeed unless we're working arm in arm with business leaders and small business across the state, doing everything we can to help you grow and expand, something we had not done for 30 or 40 years previously. And personally speaking, coming out of business myself, telecommunications, relatively small business, it was really important to me to get a few things right, to start reestablishing the relationship with government. First of all, that means getting your fiscal house in order. And, Chris alluded to, we were on a fiscal roller coaster for decades and going bankrupt and a lot of money and then cutting and constantly raising taxes every 3 or 4 years like clockwork. And to me, the first thing I wanted to do was bring some certainty to the budget process, get a budget that's going to be in balance, not just when I propose it, but at the end of the year as well. We've had a surplus 3 years in a row. That doesn't very often happen. And set aside a little bit in our rainy day fund, which is so important because our revenue stream is pretty volatile. And right now we're strong. A lot of our costs are fixed. So it's really important that we be able to save and invest during the good times and make sure we don't have to slash services or cut or raise taxes during the tough times. And right now, Connecticut is in a better position to do that than many, many years. Chris saluted the 2017 budget. I'll be blunt. I was not as big a fan. It came in 4 months too late. B, it had a built-in $3.75 billion deficit that we inherited and had 60 days to put together a budget. That's not just me. I mean, outside rating agencies looked at Connecticut and, downgraded. But there are some reforms that we had to make sure that we honored. And that meant that using the surplus to pay down long-standing pension obligations. And, there are a lot of requests to use that surplus in different ways. We held the line on that. We've paid down, billions. Never before. Usually people add to the mortgage when it comes to your pension obligations. We have paid down principal, which will save future governors hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And paying down the principal combined with outsized market returns means that our unfunded liability is, tens of billions less than it could have been otherwise. And so we have a long way to go, but that is just something we have to continue to build on. I will tell you that with this legislative session coming up, people are going to see, hey, the consensus revenues, hey, Gov, you got another big surplus. Yippee, let's go spend it or tax cut it away. And a couple of things to remember. One, with that volatility cap, a lot of it by law, by legislative fiat, which is not bad, says that's got to go to, pension reduction. Secondly, the feds are very strict. They did not want a lot of the federal money that Chris referred to, artificially propping up our revenues. They limited how much we can cut taxes because they don't want a cliff at the end of year 2 when the federal money starts winding down. And then what do? I think probably correctly, they want some certainty so that small businesses, superintendents, mayors know what they can plan for. And that's why they've been pretty clear about what we can do and what we can't do. We can do some things, Chris, you said, what are some of the priorities? We have the ability to cut taxes. and we can do under the consensus revenue and under the federal law, we can at least cut, $250, $300 million, and do that on a supportable way going forward so we don't create the cliff. I think for me, I've been trying to do this for some years now. I think it's time for us to take a good hard look at property tax. That's a car tax as well as residence. It's a tax that's fixed. You got to pay it during bad times and good times. It's unforgiving in that sense. It hits the middle class particularly hard. So that will be one of my strong initiatives, is to do what we can to reduce the property tax and expand the base of who gets access to property tax reduction, and also focus on the cars, since cars, are big towns, big cities everywhere, and it's incredibly disproportionate mill rate impact on that. Secondly, in this legislative session, we are going to continue to focus on COVID and crime, because public health and public safety go hand in hand when it comes to managing our way through COVID and getting our economy running on all cylinders. The public health side, first of all, we've submitted, we had 300 executive orders. We're down to, I think it's 11 right now as regards to nursing homes and purchasing and vaccinations for frontline healthcare workers and nursing homes. It's fairly limited in terms of, the EOs we think we need to continue safely. And now the ball's in the legislature's court, which is, as it should be. And they planned for this going back, when they said the executive powers end on February 15th. So I hope they adjust, ratify, change the executive orders we need to keep going as we get through the ninth inning of Omicron. I can tell you, as Chris said, Connecticut did, after getting hit really hard that first 120 days when nobody knew a thing, we have outperformed our peers for the last, year and a half. Thanks to each and every one of you, not through heavy mandates, but just encouragement, incentives, doing what we could to get people vaccinated. Most vaccinated, least infected state, in the country, more or less, over the last, year plus. I know we had a scare with Omicron. It went up like this. Well, now it's going down like this. No time to hang the mission accomplished banner on the aircraft carrier, but it does imply to me that if this trend continues, through the end of this month, we'll have a much better sense of how we manage through the last of COVID, how we keep our economy open, how we keep our restaurants and bars and stores and manufacturing open. They've been open more than just about any other state over the last, year and a half. But we got to continue to give customers confidence to come in, employees confidence to come in. I need teachers to have the confidence to be in the schools. And that's why we continue to really be fairly strict on all the mitigation measures to give people the confidence that you can get back about your life and do that safely. Finally, that's public health. Public safety will continue to be a focus. We're trying to work with the legislators on a bipartisan basis. Sometimes I think the critics understate the nature of the problem. They think it's related specifically to a couple of crimes like cars and shooting, but there is extraordinary stress and distress across our community in Connecticut and far and away. You see that reflected in domestic abuse. You see that reflected in addiction. You see that reflected in a lot of violent or extreme behavior. You see that reflected in racist graffiti on the walls of synagogues. You see that reflected in shootings, which are up, and you see that reflected in carjackings, all of which are symptoms of something bigger. So what we're working with the legislature is, this is what we need in terms of social supports, mental health, ways to help some of these young first or second time offenders get back on their feet, get in the game, and without potential for violence in the community. And coming down pretty strict on those repeat offenders who are the ones that really jeopardize safety, working closely with judiciary, They know the entire rap sheet of anybody that's arrested, so they can sentence accordingly. We're making sure that the courts prioritize, in particular, this juvenile crime. So on the next day, you have access to a courtroom. So there's no sense that there's a rotating door and back out you go again. We have a way to go there. We're working with the legislature on that. But Chris, I think that's long enough for me. I think you have a sense of what some of my priorities are, and I hope you have a few questions.
Oh, I'm sure we have plenty of questions, Governor. I just want to expand on what you talked about with the workplaces and them being safe and encouraging folks to come back into the workplace. And you and the administration and the business community have worked so greatly together since March of 2020 to make sure, first and foremost, our workplaces are safe. And in fact, it's interesting, Connecticut has some of the safest workplaces in the world, Governor, and recently it lowered the workers' comp renewal rates for the state. But staying on workforce and workforce development, our 2022 priorities that we'll release later today will focus on, of course, the labor participation issue. You and I have had a lot of conversations about this. How do we get people back and fill these open jobs that we have? Some ideas we have in there is certainly expanding the workforce by making it easier to get some folks who are incarcerated back to the workforce. The manufacturing apprenticeship tax credit, expanding that so that small businesses can use it. And removing maybe the sales and use tax on training. Any thoughts you have, Governor, on how we're going to get our arms around this labor participation issue and fill those open jobs that we have here in Connecticut?
Well, in terms of what you just referenced, we're with you on that, Chris. A lot of it is confidence, getting people back to work. We were hit pretty hard. A lot of folks, especially in some of the cities, still very hesitant about that. And then they saw, oh my God, as Omicron spiked up, we still have one of the lowest infection rates in the country. I think we're 5th lowest. That's false comfort when you see the spread that's going around the country, but it's also a way to remind, our workers, our employees, our customers, we put safety first. We opened our schools faster than most anybody else in the region. We were able to do that safely, not just last September, but a year ago, September. And same for the stores and businesses. And secondly, Chris, to your point, we've got $100 million into job training. We've got to continue to have the best workforce in the world. And to each and every one of you, I want to make sure that you have workers available through the apprenticeship program, through our certificate programs. So what your job needs can be filled, not just this year, but for the foreseeable future. And Chris, we want to put together those programs with you and your members. Kelly Valeris is working with businesses across the state, seeing what their needs are, and they help us with the curriculum so we can provide that training.
And that was a great move, Governor. We talked about it last year, creating that workforce star, if you were, and putting Kelly Marie Valeris in there, and now having that strategy. And so that we have these dollars, we can start executing the priorities under that strategy, and the hundreds of millions of dollars that you mentioned in training is certainly going to help upskill folks, give them the skill set required to fill some of these jobs. One of the other things we talked about, maybe that's been holding us back from filling some of the jobs and the workforce issue, Governor, is just we've had some anemic population growth in Connecticut, since the 2008, 2010 recession. That got better during COVID. We had thousands of people moving to our state, a real opportunity for us to maybe capitalize on that and continue to grow the population, because if we don't grow the population, we don't grow the workforce. So some of the things we've been supportive of is blending the tax relief so that there's some business tax relief, but certainly individual tax relief. Make Connecticut affordable so people want to move to Connecticut and continue to grow our population. There's been some discussion, certainly in the media, everyone having different stands on what that individual tax relief is. Why don't you give us your thoughts or your prioritization for the individual tax relief that you think will be the most impactful to continue to grow the Connecticut population?
Yeah, and I think you put your finger on it. Our entire region here in the Northeast is more or less lost population for a long period of time, or to be blunt, at least not grown nearly as fast as some of the Sun Belt states. As you point out, in 2020, Connecticut turned that around big time. Maybe a lot of that could have been related to COVID, a lot of that related to our tax differential compared to our neighbors. A lot of that related to just job opportunity here. So we got to build on that momentum, because it's not going to be automatic. For me on taxes, first thing, first governor in a generation not to raise income or sales tax. So I wanted to start with some tax certainty, give you some confidence there. Chris, we greatly cut the income tax for, a lot of working families, those earning up to about $50,000 or $60,000. I think that makes a difference. We're going to, as I alluded to before, I'm going to present to the legislature a plan for significant property tax reform that is particularly hits, I think, the middle class. We can provide relief there. We're greatly reducing the taxes on pensions, maybe even be able to eliminate them in this legislative session. So that gives you a broad sense. But remember, affordability is more than taxes. Affordability is holding the line on healthcare costs. We've had the smallest increase in many a year the last few years, some of which related to COVID, some of which related to transparency and holding down those costs, which makes a big difference. We're trying to make sure education is of much less cost to everybody going forward, opening up our community colleges, opening up our certificate programs. We've been able to provide some short-term rent and utility relief, but that's more related to COVID, just to help those working families that were really stuck through a tough time.
Yeah, affordability certainly first and foremost, Governor. You're absolutely right on that. And one thing that was, about holding the line on taxes last year is our neighboring states were raising taxes. So it made Connecticut more affordable, if you will, just by making sure we didn't do more damage. And now this year, potentially even being able to lower those taxes. On the business tax relief, our priorities have, again, a package of business taxes, probably about $200 million in total fiscal note, but no one of them really being a significant dollar amount. We talked about the manufacturing apprenticeship tax credit probably cost us about $1.4 million to maybe put that in place, something relatively small dollar amount, but it sends a huge message to manufacturing community, which, as you know, is one of the biggest in Connecticut. And a couple other things that we've heard about in visiting member companies is the R&D tax credit. Connecticut companies do so much innovation and investment, as you know, in this state because we compete on technology, we compete on innovation, we compete on our workforce. And getting the R&D tax credit expanded to small businesses so they can take full advantage of it, something that you and the legislator actually raised the percentage of the R&D tax credit last year. What are your thoughts on the business tax relief? Obviously, we want to make sure we have ones that are meaningful, impactful, but as you mentioned, first and foremost, being fiscally conservative and not draining the rainy day fund so that we can pay down long-term liabilities. Any thoughts you have on some business tax relief?
A, certainty. B, as you point out, whatever it is, let's make sure it's meaningful and makes a difference. I mean, we got rid of some clutter taxes, got rid of the business entity tax. I would just say, Chris, keep working with David Lehman and Mark Boughton. Then we have to work with our friends in the legislature to see what the priorities are, for example, your members. And if you tell us that's going to be tied to real job creation, economic growth, that makes it all the more compelling and a much easier case for me to make.
Yeah, and that's our priority, Governor, is making sure it's tied to economic growth and continuing to grow jobs, grow our economy, so that when we get into those out years where right now we're forecasting a deficit, we've actually had more revenue coming in and we don't have those deficits, and we continue to invest in critical things like education, mental health, childcare, which we know is a big thing holding us back. And on the education front, we had a question come in that the governor of Rhode Island recently released about $450 million for school construction in Rhode Island. Is that something you've considered with the ARPA funds? And maybe talk about how the ARPA funds have also come into our boards of eds and our towns and cities to be used on school improvements.
Well, thanks to our friends in Washington, about $500 million a year extra going to schools and about $500 million a year extra going to our municipalities. So they've got significant resources. A lot of that, when it comes to the schools, has been in and around apprentice teachers, counselors, after-school programs, apprentice programs. But there is also the opportunity with those revenues to take a look at ventilation systems. We as a state can come in and work with the municipalities to do that. I think it makes some sense. And we are continuing to build our schools and renovate our schools. We have one of the best school systems in the country. I talk to businesses, every week. They all reference the fact that, Texas is great, but I probably have to send my kid to a private school. Connecticut, I can send my kid to a great public school. That's a real benefit to the parent, and it's also a real benefit to the taxpayer.
Yeah, the schools are huge, Governor. That's our pipeline to our workforce, and we talk about how we compete on the skills, talent, and innovation of our people here in Connecticut, because we are in a low-cost state, if you will. But we're a very innovative state, a very productive state. And on the school front and affordability, there's a lot of questions about how can we afford to do all this stuff when the federal dollars are gone. And you and I have talked about the budget deficit potentially in the out years. And one of the ways to afford to continue to invest in things that are critical to us here in the state is to lower the cost, if you will, lower the costs in the state. And your administration, through some legislation, commissioned a report that came out last year called the Creates Report, which has some recommendations in there of savings potentially up to $600 to $900 million, savings that would lower our budgetary costs so that we could actually spend more money and invest more money in things like our education system and child care. What are your thoughts about the recommendations in the Create Report? I know you and the administration are trying to tackle some of the highest priority ones for basically be able to lower costs here in Connecticut, making state government more efficient, more effective, delivering services as we've seen in DMV, DOL, DRS, better than we did before.
Yeah, Chris, if I had to prioritize, and I'm a little biased because I come out of the world of information technology, we've got to upgrade our technology systems. I got Josh Jabal over there at Department of Administrative Services. He's not a former, legislator or something. He used to work at IBM. So you can see the priority we've put there. We've got a big tsunami of people retiring in less than 6 months. We've got to prepare for that. And that means training people in many cases to replace those that are leaving, or more, or just as much, make sure we have people trained on the technology so that we can do more with less and provide a much better customer experience. I'm a business guy, these aren't taxpayers, these are our customers. We got to make sure that we do that. You referenced DMV. That was sort of, a pet for me because I've done a couple of these campaigns and everybody loves to kick around DMV. I've been waiting for hours. The government can't get anything right. So I just said, hey, look, it's the most forward-facing thing we do. If we're going to show people we know how to make a difference, let's start with DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles. And, we always like the kid. You can sit around in your pajamas having a cup of coffee and to renew your license now online. And that's how we're trying to move state government. So that gets to savings and that gets to customer experience.
Yeah, and the private sector, Governor, has been doing that for years, right? That's how the private sector is able to do more with maybe less people or the same amount of people, is more efficient, investing in technology, improving their processes. And you've brought that to the government sector, and that's going to be critical. Obviously, we can't continue to add costs for every services we deliver. Otherwise, they're just not going to be affordable. And so what we've seen so far, hopefully just the tip of the iceberg, Governor, and a lot more to come. Like I said, the Creates Report has quite a bit of recommendations in there for some significant savings, and we look forward to working with you and your staff on making those happen. Governor, let's just pivot a little bit to infrastructure. It's been something we've talked about since your first day in office, and maybe before you even got in office. Our roads, our bridges, getting into the cities faster, just a nightmare because we haven't made the investments we needed to in Connecticut for such a long time, and that just goes back to our fiscal inconsistencies and not being able to invest in the things we need to that we just talked about. But we're getting a lot of money from Washington, another bucket of money coming in with the Investments Act, $5.4 billion over the next 5 years. Maybe talk to us about the mechanics about how that will be spent and strategized and the prioritization for those dollars.
Yeah, you're right about how herky-jerky our policies are regarding infrastructure. I mean, obviously, I doubled down. I was part of defense. That was the national highway system. Then we kind of took our eye off the ball, and we're all done on that. And then here in Connecticut, my Annis River Bridge collapses in the early 80s. We ramped up a lot of, at least road and bridge safety upgrades, which were necessary. But now it's 30 years again later, and where are we? And what's true in Connecticut is true around the country, although I always tell the governor of Georgia, I mean, your old bridges are 30 years old, mine are 100 years old. So we have other infrastructure needs. Here's the deal. I think this infrastructure bill is really important. It was transformative. Happy it was bipartisan at the end. And I think it's just the type of thing the government's got to do. And I keep telling my guys, our job is to make sure the money makes a difference. It is well invested, accounted for, and we can show results at the end of the day. You know, if you're a business guy and you've got this $5 billion investment, what's the rate of return? And, you know, I'm going down to talk to the new head of Amtrak today. We're going to get a lot more money for Amtrak, which is, you know, Boston down to Washington, but right through Connecticut. We'll be able to take an hour off that commute if we do that right. And for a state like Connecticut, which is, you know, you got Boston, you got New York, you've got this amazing quality of life right between those two barbells. Our transportation system is that important. You know, how do you take time off a rail? Every 100-year-old bridge that we upgrade or change can take 2 or 3 minutes off the commute because you got to slow and speed up to go through there. So, so I've got a guy named Mark Boughton who runs DRS. He's sort of helping to oversee how we're going to be investing this money. We have to work with Washington. We have to work with mayors. We have to work with legislators and have to work with the business community to make sure that you understand what our priorities are and come right back at us. Where do you think we ought to be making more of an investment?
Yeah, that's going to be huge for Connecticut, Governor. We've talked for so long about the need to move people in and out of our urban areas, whether the businesses are in the urban areas and the people are in the suburban areas, or vice versa here in Connecticut. And that's going to be critical. That's how we're going to get the people to the jobs. And in addition, the Governor, I know this is an area that you're an expert on, but we have a huge opportunity here with a lot of folks moving to Connecticut and working remotely. And the need for a great infrastructure system around them that doesn't necessarily involve highways and bridges, but broadband and telecommunications. And again, your background, how about the investments in the infrastructure to make sure people can live in Connecticut and work remotely very seamlessly?
Yeah, so we'll be doing that right alongside the telecommunications companies. As you point out, Chris, focusing on those areas that are really don't have access to high-speed broadband. Some of that's our more rural towns where I want to make sure you can do everything from Brooklyn, Connecticut, you can from Brooklyn, New York, and some of our urban areas where they just have, you know, Wi-Fi blackout zones. You know, and we found out the last year, look, telelearning was okay, but it's going to be part of our education going forward. Telehealth was a very big deal. If you'd have said telecommuting, if I don't have to go down to the big city every day, but just once or twice a week, A, make it easier by transportation, and B, make sure you have the very best broadband access. And we're going to be able to do that under this bill. There's significant resources there, so we'll be able to expand that out. And we're getting a lot of very interesting proposals from the private sector, including one up in East Hartford.
Many feel that's a huge opportunity in Connecticut, that remote workforce, which will be somewhat permanent in the future in some ways, you know, how much we all don't know, being able to encourage people to come and live in Connecticut and be able to work remotely because we have the best infrastructure and we have the best talent. So that's, we look forward to that investment, Governor. That's going to be, you know, really critical. Just going back to affordability, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about something that maybe you and I haven't always agreed on, but certainly something we'll continue to have a dialogue about, and that's maybe using some of the federal dollars like some other states have to pay down some of the debt we've borrowed from the federal government to keep our unemployment trust fund intact. And now you and the legislator came to an agreement last year that we will take $155 million to pay back the roughly $700 million that we borrowed. The rest of it, as of right now, would fall on the shoulders of the business community come around November when the assessments come. And that's what happened after the 08-09 recession. And, you know, so I need to ask you, because here I am asking for tax relief. At the same time, the business community is about to get a tax increase if they have to pay back these federal dollars that we've borrowed. So your thoughts on using some more money to potentially pay back some more of the unemployment dollars that we borrowed from the feds?
Yeah, you're right, Chris. I am a little hesitant in this sense. We borrowed a lot and had $1 billion or so outstanding. We were making real progress in reducing our outstanding liability on unemployment fund until COVID hit. We greatly reduced that over the last 6 months. As you point out, we did take $150 million of ARPA money and use that into the into the fund. We could, with very low unemployment claims right now, I think we paid down about another $250 million just without the true up. And I think you'll see that continue. So we're making progress there. Thirdly, we get it at a very low interest rate from the Fed. So you got to decide, is it more importantly for ARPA to use that to buy more testing resources or unemployment? And I think in unemployment, I do have a low cost alternative, but it's something I look at. I'm not going to let those rates go up on small business.
Well, we look forward to working with you on that, Governor. We have a question in the Q&A here about taxes on pension, and I really think it goes to this point, Governor. With the number of state employees eligible to retire over the next coming years, we talked about the recommendations in the CREATE reports to lower costs with those folks retiring and modernizing government. Some states, including Connecticut, sometimes see a flee of those folks who retire out of the state because there isn't, taxes on the pension. Thoughts for how we could maybe keep some of our retired folks in Connecticut so we don't have a population outflow, if you will?
Yeah, that's true. I think, working with the legislature in our first budget, I think we've reduced the tax on pensions and, 401ks by about 70%. I know there's some discussions about what it would take to just eliminate the tax on pension income and 401k. And I think that's something I look at sympathetically. I think it's that important. As an aside, people sometimes worry, that the estate tax drives people down to Florida. A lot of people go and move into Florida before estate tax, but we've eliminated that for couples with an estate up to, I think it's $16 million. So that takes care of probably 97% of the estates that you're thinking about there. And we've reduced the outstanding for the bigger estates as well. So we're very competitive within our region on that front. And more importantly, for 97% of our citizens stay in Connecticut. There's no reason to go down to Florida. Good place to visit. A couple of weeks, sunshine, I can't argue with that. But then come on back.
Yeah, and there's a good opportunity, Governor, that those folks who are retiring may end up in the private sector because we're going to have to leverage the private sector to get some of these things done with these federal dollars coming in, leverage our private sector design and engineering firms to make sure that we're not hamstrung from releasing these dollars. So, Governor, I'll ask you this one last question. This is our economic outlook for the year, kind of a two-parter. So what's your thoughts? Crystal ball it, what do you think 2022 holds for the residents of Connecticut? And what role do you want or see the business community playing? How can we help you?
Look, I continue to be pretty positive. I'm positive, like it or not, the federal government has poured a lot of, investment money around. I think there's going to be strong demand for your products and services. And I think we've got a lot of investment going on, starting with the transportation and infrastructure and environmental infrastructure. I think that's going to represent tens of thousands of jobs. People are earning a little more. You've heard me say, Chris, a million times, I don't want more taxes, but I want more taxpayers. And I think that's why I'm positive. That said, look, let's not be crazy. We haven't had a recession in a long time. And some of this prosperity is going to be throttled back with interest rates and the such. So we got to be ready. But with probably the biggest rainy day fund per capita, one of the biggest in the country, we're relatively well prepared. And finally, to our friends at CBIA, we're trying our best to make sure the government is, a partner. And I need you right back as a partner. I need you as champions for the state of Connecticut. I need you saying, hey, I've got this supplier in Pennsylvania who was thinking about an expansion. Let us know. We've got Advanced CT. It's led by all of our business leaders. They're the best ones to help us recruit, draw, and expand. And frankly, I don't forget the fact that the other 95% of our growth comes from you. It's internal expansion. Make it easier for you to grow and prosper, and make it easier for young people and others to start up a business, which is a conversation we'll have later. And I'm wearing black today because Meatloaf passed away. He was a long-time Connecticut resident and one hell of a rocker. Anyway, Chris, thanks to you. Thanks to our friends at CBIA and Metro Hartford, and let's continue to work together.
Thank you, Governor. We have huge opportunities in front of us here in Connecticut, and we look forward to working with you and the administration to continue to move our state forward. And big Meatloaf fan myself, Governor, saw him at Toad's Place years ago, and I'll put my black on later.
Thanks, everybody.